Hello everyone. Today I want to show you a game from the candidates playoffs from 1950. With the white pieces is David Bronstein, and with the black pieces is Isaac Boleslavsky. And the winner of this candidates match would go on to play um, Mikhail Botvinnik in the 1951 championship match. And those of you that know your chess history know that Bronstein went on to play Botvinnik in that match and wound up drawing the match. And that is one of the, I think that's the last championship match where you see the Dutch defense um, played consistently throughout the match at that high of a level. Just a quick background on these guys, Bronstein and Boleslavsky. I mean, you could look it up online and stuff, but just real quick, these guys were, great chess players, both at the prime of their powers, prime of their careers at the time. Both coming off great performances. I think Bronstein had tied for first 2 consecutive years in the Russian Championship. Boleslavsky um, very strong performances also. These guys were great friends. Bronstein winds up marrying his daughter later. And the interesting thing was that before these guys went into the candidates playoff match, Boleslavsky was leading the candidates tournament by a full point with 2 rounds to go. And what he did was he accepted two quick draws, and Bronstein won both of his games to create this playoff scenario. And then they had a match, and then Bronstein winds up winning. But what's interesting about this is that that just one, how tides turn because Boleslavsky, was probably his chance to go on to play Botvinnik for the world championship. But interestingly enough, is that he reminds me of Shirov in that he had a terrible record against Botvinnik. I think he had 7 losses, maybe a few draws, and no wins. So he didn't really want to play Botvinnik. So you know, I'm not saying it was collusion and stuff, but it's very interesting. Like if you read about the background, I'm not gonna get into all of that. Um, and the reason why I bring up Shirov because Shirov had a chance to uh, play for the world championship, or was actually denied the chance to play for a world championship when he played against and defeated Vladimir Kramnik in a match. I think it was 1998, and he had a terrible record against world champion at the time, Gary Kasparov. I don't think he ever beat Kasparov. It's a number of losses though. So this game again, Bronstein has the white pieces, Boleslavsky with the black pieces. D4, knight f6, c4, d6, knight c3, and e5. This is kind of like an offbeat um, line of the King's Indian. And remember, this is at a time where the King's Indian is just, the theory is just being developed and pioneered. So these guys were very creative in trying out new ideas, different pawn formations, etc. But this is a line that still playable today. You'll see a lot of um, grandmaster games in this line, and I like to play it myself actually. Uh, it's good to for avoiding preparation. Extensive preparation. You just get something that's solid and might be a little theoretically inferior, but you're not going to be lost, and you'll get a good game and with some winning chances. Knight f3. Um, this endgame, this endgame after, um, this endgame after, it's kind of like the Berlin, but of the Queen's pawn opening. This endgame after D takes E5, D takes E5, Queen takes D8, King takes D8. Really, practice has shown doesn't really give White too much. There's many different defenses that can be employed against these. One is this knight fd7, um, and let's say for example g3, f6. That is one. You don't even have to bring the knight back if you don't want D takes, queen takes, king takes, and say knight f3. Just a simple knight c6 works. So there's many different ways to defend this ending. It's just not enough for white just to take away castling rights. Black structure is good. Um, he doesn't really have any other deficits besides the king can't castle. So if you can't bring the king under danger or exploit the temporary lack of coordination, black equalizes. Therefore, masters tend to keep the tension. Playing knight f3. e4 is also possible, trying to go in a king's Indian. The, one of the things about this move, though, with just playing e4 is black can gain time here after e takes d4, queen takes d4, and knight c6, and then say after queen d1, g6 is possible. If you are familiar with accelerated dragon positions, in the Sicilian play is very similar. Of course, you had the c pawn back here, and in the accelerated dragon, the c file would be open because it stems from the Sicilian. Instead, the e file is open. So play is somewhat similar. And if you're familiar with those positions, there's an option to play like that. And again, this is leads to Marazzi bind types positions, f3, all of this stuff like this, these type of positions. So it's an offbeat line, but rich in strategic possibilities. All right, so Bronstein opted for knight f3 against Boleslavsky. Knight bd7 was played, again keeping the tension. Again, it's possible to play e takes d4 here, but instead of taking it with the queen, you take with the knight. And black has to be very careful in this type of position. Of course, he's solid, but as you can see, white has more space. And then one of the simple ideas is utilizing this outpost on d5, perhaps playing a move like bishop g5, e3, bishop e2, castling, rook to c1, and utilizing the d5 outpost to provoke c6 at one point. Black has to get some counterplay, and then turning the focus on a new weakness on d6. So giving up the center is important. It is playable, but you have to, understand what you're getting into there. Boleslavsky decides to maintain the tension. Knight bd7, g3, g6, bishop g2, and now it's starting to look like a, kind of like a regular King's Indian here. I would classify this as an old Indian, but usually the old Indian, the bishop end up on e7. Okay, the rook e8, and the one of the ideas, of course, is to take here, right? Black is attacking on the dark squares, then in turn expose this pawn, and then also create space for the knight to leap in. Bishop e3, and Boleslavsky plays knight g4, attacking the bishop here. Playable move, of course, once again, just e takes d4, and knight takes d4. And once the knight captures on d4, the pawn is protected by the bishop on g2 and the knight on c3. And then play can continue knight e4, knight e5, excuse me. So instead, he just opts for knight g4 right away, going after the bishop here. Bishop g5, f6. Bronstein keeps his bishops, and he kind of shuts down black's bishop. And now if you look at this position, black is super solid here. doesn't have a lot going on offensively, but as far as White's attacking prospects, it's really hard to generate any type of attack here. So this is a game for a patient player, right, with both pieces. So if you're an attacking player and you end up in this position, you'll be frustrated because it's hard to just outright attack. This is a closed position, and you just have to be very patient here. Boleslavsky takes the knight back to h6. It has fulfilled its duty, it attacked the bishop, and now the knight is going to go back to f7, fortifying this e pawn, and also serving as a defender on the king side, and then in some cases threatening to hop back out on the e5 square. h3, useful move in these kind of positions, keeping pieces off of g4. Again, black is not really at a big disadvantage here, but is if he does have a disadvantage, it's a little bit in the space department. But his structure is pretty sound, and black would like to perhaps trade off a couple of pieces to relieve the cramped nature of his position. Knight f7, and then the bishop returns to its former post. Knight f8, and the idea behind knight f8, again, black is very cramped, so he's trying to find optimal places for his pieces. So he wants to put more pressure on a white center to get white to define the center. Is white gonna capture? Is white gonna push forward? He wants to press. He obviously doesn't want to take. So what he wants to do is just pressure white center to force white and to make it some type of decision. So he brings the knight to f8 with the idea of coming to east, bring the knight to e6, putting more pressure on the d pawn. Queen d2, and there it is, knight e6. And now d5, so he gets a commitment out of white, and knight f8. So here we have to say that white's position is definitely like a more favorable form in the King's Indian. He already has his queen side counterplay ready to go. Those of you familiar with the King's Indian know that white often wants to play for an attack on the queen side with moves like b4, a4, c5, and then lining up on the c file with the rooks, opening the c file after c takes d6, and then bring the knight to b5, etc. Sometimes attacking the a7 pawn, and just probing weaknesses, probing and provoking weaknesses from black on that side of the board. And then on the other side of the board, black wants to play f5, f4, and conduct the king side attack. But we can see that with this solid fiend kettle here that white has, that his king side is very much fortified. And on top of that, usually in the King's Indian proper, the rook is not on e8, it's on f8, right? Supporting the advance of the pawn on f5 and opening the f file and sometimes pushing to f4, right? So we see these knights are kind of jumbled up on f7 and f8, and the bishop is where it normally is. The bishop is bad also, and so generally we could say that white's position is superior, and that white can easily pursue his plan on the queen side, and black still has some more organizing to do to get started here. All right, so we have to give the nod here to white, and again, white's next moves should consist of basically setting up for the break on c5. And again, in closed positions, it's important to recognize your breaks. One break is here for white, and the other break is f4. Now you should be able to determine for yourself which break is better and why you would prefer one over the other. Obviously, the C5 break is better. It's already um, prepared for one thing, and then secondly, black does not get counterplay. If you were to, let's say this knight was somewhere else, and you were to organize this break, you can see the counterplay that um, black would be able to generate after e takes f4, and then there will be counterplay against the e pawn and down to e file in general, and then white would constantly have to be on the lookout for pieces coming to e5 after say f5, f4, etc. This bishop would come alive. In other words, the break on f4 would be double-edged for white, and you don't want to have a you don't want to make a move like that. You rather keep black shut down on the king side and play a safe break. For black's breaks, he has two breaks. Well, actually three, but here's one, c6, and you see that off in the King's Indians, right? Opening up the c file. The other break is f5, as you probably familiar with. And here, b5 is possible. Usually a little harder to obtain. And again, sometimes black will choose the f5 break. Sometimes he will go for c6, and sometimes he'll choose both, depending, on the position. These positions are quite rich in possibilities. So rook a e1 is played by Bronstein. Okay. c5. This is interesting because white has a chance to play en passant here, right? But if he does that, although black has this backward pawn on d6, he is strengthened his center, right? White's center has been weakened, and eventually black will probably be able to get this pushing. If not, it's well protected by this knight on f7. All right. And after moves, say like b3, for instance, and then bishop to e6, eventually black is going to organize this breakthrough right here. And so that's not a move that black would like to do here. So after c5, now this possibility is over that white had before. See, when white chose to do rook a e1, he did have the option of playing this move c5 here. Okay, so he could have went for the break right away. There was nothing stopping him. And I'm not saying that rook a e1 was bad. I mean, he's developing another piece. So c5 happens. So now black has kind of slowed down white's activity over here on the king side. So now on the queen side, excuse me, and now white must prepare another break, which is b4. Okay, so he must usually prepare that with a move like a3, and sometime the rook might have to come back to b1 and then play b4. So Bronstein plays a3, bishop d7, and there it is, b4. Now b6 is possible here, right? But it might be the best move, but it is, it's just a really cramped position. This is one of those positions where black is just kind of holding on and basically trying to draw with little prospects here. So Boleslavsky plays queen c8, with the idea of attacking this pawn right here. And also there's this idea of taking here on b4 and then taking the pawn on c4. Bronstein opens up the queen side, which is part of his plan, and he creates a pass pawn. All right, but this is not, um, you know, simple and cut and dry as it seems, because the knight on f7 is ready to blockade this pawn, and this knight on f7 is so powerful that it not only blockades the pawn, but it protects the weakness of here. So if white tries to build up on the c file, b file, so king h2, knight d6, very powerful, because and if you don't know about blockading pieces, you should do some study on that. But this knight right here not only, you know, blocks this pawn, protects this one, but it's also attacking c4 and e4. And since these pawns are advanced and there's no other pawns next to them, they must be maintained by pieces, which in turn limits those pieces' attacking possibilities, since they have to guard the pawns. So queen d3. So does Bronstein really want to guard those pawns with his queen? Of course not. Queen c7. Now this is a critical point right here. So knight d2 was played, and white is anticipating the move f5. Okay, another idea instead of that move is a4, which kind of guarantees that these pawns will not be able to advance, you know, without creating serious weakness. In other words, you would like this pawn to stay back here, and then maybe later on pile up on the b file and attack these pawns. Now black, on the other hand, right, would like to play a move like a6. Again, let's not worry about the impossibility of the move, but let's just think of what he would like to do. He would like to play a move like a6 and b5 and liberate himself on the queen side, because remember, there's 1, 2, 3 pawns for black on the queen side and 2 here. So black would like, you know, in his dreams, to create a pass pawn on the queen side to give him some counterplay. So a4 kind of goes toward eliminating that. You know, it's like some type of prophylaxis here. So Bronstein chose knight d2. There's f5, and again, it's very risky because the black pieces are misplaced here. Like I said before, this rook belongs in the f file. So in the e file, this knight is here, looking real suspicious, but he's just holding on by a thread here. Bronstein plays f4, and remember what I said about this break, how it's possible to create some it's double-edged. So f4 is played, and this move creates opportunities for white, for black. So I'm not sure that move, I don't think that was probably the best move, but it's hard to find a real constructive move here. But perhaps this move a4. But then you have to calculate this move f4 coming, right? But after g takes f4, and let's say for argument's sake e takes f4, remember the rook is not on the f file, so you would just be able to take that. So f4 would be out the question, and you will still have your prophylaxis on the queen side there, because I really don't think black can do too much with its pieces set up the way they are. Bronstein played f4, and I think this kind of helps black out a little bit. For example, a move like queen a5, for instance, not necessarily here, just to pick up a pawn or something like that, but then there's a subtle threat here of just, not so subtle, but there's a threat here of e takes f4, and that's what I was saying, how this break is double-edged because black can benefit also. So knight e2, for example, followed by the opening up of this position here. And the position is very complicated, and it just gives black, I think, more chances than he would have normally had. Let's move on. So after f4, Boleslavsky didn't play that move. He played h5. And then after king h1 by Bronstein, right, he gets off of this diagonal here where the queen is, and at some point h4 might be played. Knight h7, and there's that knight which has kind of like been lingering around, not really having too much to do. He tries to get into the fray, so to speak. Now here's where it gets exciting. Bronstein plays knight b5, and I think it's incorrect because this allows a lot of counterplay from black after this move. I mean, he has to make some kind of known moves because his position, his pawn structure is better. So it's kind of like he just has to kind of let black, like, just kind of be stifled in this cramped position. You can't rush this position. It's kind of like you just have to be real patient, understand the better pawn structure, and just keep things as they are and gradually grind the opponent down. And you see, for instance, in this position, this is a sample position that I brought up. You see how this knight comes here, and we're going to eliminate this blockader, for instance, because this passed pawn is going to be a killer. Right? But you just have to take like these slow steps and eliminate, the problems in the position, and then eventually your position is going to shine through. This pawn is weak, but you have to be patient. Alright, but Bronstein played knight b5 here, and he wants to get rid of this blockader here. Alright, but it allows a lot of counterplay here. Now, he was anticipating, well, I can't say what he was anticipating, but Boleslavsky gave up the bishop here, which is an excellent move. He kept his knight, which was an important piece there. If knight takes, and perhaps Bronstein was thinking here, then you got c takes, and now this pawn can move, right? Let's say queen a5, knight c4, let's say queen a4, for example. You see, and then white gets a nice initiative going. But by giving up the bishop, the knight stays right where it's at. Right? There's still all of this pressure on e4 and c4. And notice now you had this pawn here, and now after c4, black has a dangerous passed pawn. Queen c2, c3, and the game gets really messy. E takes f5, G takes f5. Bronstein plays knight f3, and he attacks a moving target. and the e pawn, so the e pawn just comes up. Knight d4, and there's that knight again, knight f8. So Boleslavsky never kind of finds a job for that knight. The knight is shuffling back and forth between h7 and f8. Now, I know he wanted to keep this bishop, you know, looking good, but perhaps a move like knight f6, you know, getting this knight back into the game, you know, at least to a better spot, is a better move. Queen c4 is also interesting, attacking the d pawn and the b pawn. So I think both of those choices are better than this one, knight f8. Bronstein plays a4, and now rook a c8, rook c1, queen f7, attacking the d pawn, rook fd1, rook to c7, bishop f1, bishop f6, queen b3, queen g6, bishop e2. Of course not. Queen takes g3, king moves over. Now rook g1, rook ec8, and now we see how much of a pain in the neck this pawn is on c4 that white is preoccupied with. Queen d1. Now you have a double attack on the h pawn. Queen f7. And the idea here is if bishop takes here, then this queen is going to take there. Bronstein doesn't want to lose the central pawn, so he plays queen b3, queen g7. Now the threat is against the knight. On d4. Knight drops back to c2. Knight hops in. And this move is actually a mistake. That blockader was just fine. And again, I've been talking about this the whole game. Why not give this guy an opportunity? Right? And play a move like knight d7. You know, let this guy get in the you know, let me in the game, coach. So he plays knight c4, and this gives Bronstein what he wants. It removes the blockader from d6. This knight was doing a fantastic job. So bishop takes, rook takes, and now guess what? The pawn comes running up the board. So d6. So now you need something else, a different blockader. a5. Bronstein plays the move bishop a7. Now queen h7. Knight e3. Now there was nothing wrong with just playing this, you know, here and attacking this pawn. Knight e3 is played, though attacking the rook, but the rook has a nice move, right? Doesn't have to play a pure defensive move and comes here. Rook b4. Queen to d5, and now rook takes a4 from Boleslavsky. So the game is like super unbalanced right now. Okay, before, so we have to say that black has definitely made progress, because before it just looked like black, well, not look like, black had no prospects before, but Bronstein made a few inaccuracies which allowed black to get back in the game. And then of course black made some mistakes, for instance giving up that nice knight on d6, which allowed white to advance his pawn. So we see that the game is really sharp right now, and that black has these pawns wandering around on the queen side, but black's king side is real suspect in this king safety. And there's a pawn on the 6th rank, Right, that's not blockaded at this point. So after rook takes a4, rook c2, and rook c2 is, of course, um, one of those kind of moves that, nice prophylactic move to keep the pawn from advancing. And at the same time, um, Bronstein wants to play knight takes f5, but he doesn't want the pawn to advance. So he blockades the square first. But it is possible that he could have went for it right away. Knight takes f5, for example. Queen d7. Rook to g2. Knight e6. It's just a sample line. Knight h4. Knight g7. Guarding those squares. Check. Not a big deal. This forces, for all intents and purposes, for black to relinquish his bishop. And this is very dangerous. You have connected past pawns, but hey, that knight on g7 is awesome. Give up the pawn with check. And this is very sharp. I mean, anybody could win a game like this. Alright, again, this is just a sample line of analysis. So, but if you're black and you get all of that from coming out of the previous position, then I think you made out. Okay, so after rook c2, rook b4 came. And of course, we have ideas, pushing this pawn, coming here, right? Because basically, black's object, subject, and project is to try to queen one of those pawns. Okay, so now it takes f5 happens, a4, and rook d1. And here, Boleslavsky plays a3. See, because those past pawns force the opponent to, use his pieces for defense. Bishop d4. He gets rid of the defender of the dark squares, which is that bishop. And so far, so good. So he pushes a2, and of course, the perhaps rook b1 was even better here. So the idea here, there's no way to protect the back rank. So say after king g2, rook b2, and then what? You got to check there. King g8, and that check allows you to get back to defend here, to defend this guy. And now double attack here. And it's unclear to me. Knight e7, for instance. King g7. And then I guess if you don't want to trade queens, you could play a move like f5. But that, I mean, that's that's insane. This position is crazy. So he didn't play that. He played a2, which is natural move. Queen that threatening the queen to pawn. And of course, the idea here is just so he plays rook takes a2, then just to play c2, which still amazingly still does not win for black. It ends up in perpetual after queen e5 check. And that's one of the reasons white gets rid of that bishop, the dark square bishop, because he has winning chances, but if he has to bail out, he can bail out. There is there's no way out here. Even if queen f7, knight h6, king g7, Knight g6. It's just very complicated. Rook takes, and then there will be some constant checking going on here, but no mate. All right, let's go back. So after a2, queen e5 from Bronstein. King g8. And now here, Bronstein plays the move rook takes b4 after all the rook is hanging. And it's a mistake because the queen on a1 is allowed. Check. And now it's black that is winning. It's hard for me to explain that move. I mean, rook d1 works, of course. Rook takes a2. These all lead to like draws. Rook takes b4 leads to a loss. And he must have, I don't know exactly what he overlooked here. He probably thought he could either draw, he probably thought he could draw this, with the perpetual, because that's all he needed to do was draw, I believe. But if he lost this game, then Boleslavsky would be playing for the championship against Botvinnik. So after king h2, queen d1, rook g2, c2. Now this knight e7. Now here's the critical moment of the game. The match. Check. There's only two moves. One is queen takes e7. The other is king f7. And Boleslavsky just played queen takes e7. But then after d takes e7 and c1 queen, e takes f8 queen, rook takes f8, queen g5, check. It was a draw because of the perpetual. There's no way for black to get out of the checks. So that was just incredible. It was found that Boleslavsky missed a very simple win here. And I saw it when I first looked at the game. That's why I couldn't believe it. And I know people speak a lot about collusion and a lot of these early Soviet matches and all the politics going on at the time with Botvinnik, and I know Bronstein's dad was like in the gulag or something. They had all this crazy. I think during the match, he was like in prison, one of the Soviet prison camps during the match with Bronstein, or before the match with Botvinnik, and then they brought his dad, allowed his dad to come to the match and sit in the audience. But that's kind of like a psychological attack on Bronstein, because it's kind of like sending the message like, if things don't go like we want, we'll send your pops right back to prison. So there's a lot of funny stuff going here. And then strong player like Boleslavsky, I mean, just having the lead in the candidates, and then just drawing his last two games real quick, and then getting the position like this. And this, to me, is real easy to see king f7. And then he plays queen takes e7. Let me just show you, after king takes f7, there's nothing, where's the check? There's nothing, no checks. Right, so let's say, for argument's sake, this rook d4, you just take, queen takes, and a new queen. Right, knight c8, for instance, and queen takes c8, and you have two queens on the board. It's a wrap. So basically, Boleslavsky missed that chance. I don't know if he wanted it, because again, like I said, he did not have a good record against Botvinnik. He had like nothing but, like 7 losses. Something, you could look it up. He had like 7 losses, and a couple of draws, no wins. And so, and then I know too that he wanted to have some type of round robin for the world championship, like between him. Basically, before they had the playoff match, he wanted a round robin for the championship between Botvinnik, and Bronstein. And the Soviet authorities turned that idea down. And so that's why these guys had to have a playoff to decide who was gonna go. And then eventually it was Bronstein. But I just had the feeling that at least psychologically, if not intentionally, Boleslavsky wanted Bronstein to. It was kind of like they were good friends, and he was like, "All right, you got a better chance to beat him, so you go for it or whatever." And then Boleslavsky was Bronstein's second during the match, and but yeah, some of those blunders like that, like always yeah, I'm not trying to accuse anyone, but it always like made me raise my eyebrow, some of those moves. But I know players make blunders though, so that's part of chess too. But man, you look at some of these games and say, well, what if this guy won this match? And you'd have seen Boleslavsky versus Botvinnik, and and Boleslavsky in his prime. Um, and then again, you seen if you look at the 1951 match between Bronstein and Botvinnik, you'll see some real like howling moves too by Bronstein. Bronstein was clearly the stronger player in that match and should have won the match like Tao did in 1960, by a couple of points. But he made some moves, one move blunders, and you're like, what? It's like almost he's like showed Botvinnik he can beat him, and then like gave the game to him like, all right, like this is what I gotta do. Just real craziness. And then of course that match wound up being 12-12. But anyway, that's it. I know this video is long and I talk a lot, so hope you like that. Hope you learned something, and please like and subscribe.